January 1993, St. Paul, Minnesota. Hang Lee murdered by Mark Stephen Wallace. Recently, 10 months ago, Mark Stephen Wallace's own son wrote on the Reddit R.I.P. He says even he know his dad is guilty of the Hang Lee case. I think St. Paul police need to contact Mark Stephen Wallace's son immediately and bring justice to Hang Lee. Or else please lock me up in a 10x5 cell with Mark Stephen Wallace. It's 2025, we need justice and we need it now. Mark Stephen Wallace is also supposed to be getting out of prison this year also. Hang Lee was a Highland Park High School senior when she left her family's apartment at the McDonough Homes housing project in St. Paul, Minnesota to go to a job interview on January 12, 1993. She has not been seen since. Hang and her family moved to St. Paul from a refugee camp in Laos when she was younger. Friends and relatives recall her as a slight, naive teenager, a bookworm who loved romance novels, who dreamed of becoming a writer who would chronicle the Hmong experience in America. On January 12, 1993, she told her brother, Kua Lee, that her job interview was with a friend's boss, later identified as Mark Stephen Wallace, who had a small painting business. At the time, Kua was working with Hang at Wong Cafe on Rice Street, which paid $7 an hour. However, as Mark's painting business was paying slightly higher, Hang went to the job interview, with Kua stating they both were trying to help out their family with expenses by getting jobs. Hang was supposed to work on the night she disappeared, but she called her boss, Eileen Lee, no relation, and told her she had a job interview. She later opined that it was uncharacteristic of Hang to not show up the next day for work. Hang left behind her clothing, her purse which contained a lead ball and knife for her protection, $100 paycheck, and the savings she used to plan for tuition at the University of Minnesota that fall. Hang's parents, who spoke no English, reported her missing, but police initially seemed to write her off as just another troubled runaway. Kua remembers Hang saying before she left, "If I don't come back, please come looking for me. I don't trust Nikki." Nikki was Kia Lee's nickname, no relation, and she worked for Mark and was a friend of Hang's. She later told police she introduced Hang to him after he asked if she knew any girl who might also want a job. Nikki initially told police she had seen Hang leaving home with some unknown young man. Months later, Nikki changed her story and named Mark as the man she last saw Hang with. Nikki said she lied originally because she believed Hang might have run away, but expected her to return soon, and because Mark had warned her not to tell anyone about his business. Nikki worked as a receptionist at Mark's East Side painting and decorating business from December 1992 until March 1993, but investigations showed she knew little about Mark's business. Nikki revealed no customers or other business people, except young teenage boys, ever came to the business. When they came, Mark would go into his office with them and lock the door. Mark talked to Nikki about modeling and had taken several pictures of her promising that she would get a job with a friend of his. However, she never ended up meeting Mark's friend and does not know what happened to the pictures taken by Mark. Nikki also detailed an incident where she was given a drink by Mark who told her it would keep her from being nauseated by paint fumes. She started feeling numb and sleepy, waking up on the floor wrapped in a blanket. In June 1993, the police shifted their investigation from that of being a runaway when Nikki provided information about Mark's involvement and learned of Mark being out of prison for about a year and a half after being convicted of 2 rapes. He had used the premise of a job interview to rape a 16-year-old girl in Cottage Grove and later threatened to kill her and her family if she told anyone about what happened. Mark used the same ploy to contact a woman who turned out to be an undercover female officer before he was arrested. He had called a woman who with a phony offer of employment at a radio station, but the woman called police instead, who sent the undercover officer. Police searched Mark's home, office, car, and pickup truck, but found no clues, after which Mark hired an attorney and refused to speak to investigators. Mark stated that he dropped off Hang at a gas station to meet some friends once the job interview ended. However, none of Hang's friends reported seeing her at the gas station. While police investigated Mark as a suspect, he was never arrested or charged in connection with Hang's case. In 2016, Mark was in jail in Washington County, and St. Paul police were hopeful that charges filed against him in Washington County, kidnapping, stalking, and possession of methamphetamine, could lead to a break in Hang's case. but at the time, he had not yet spoken to St. Paul investigators. According to the criminal complaint, Mark was verbally and physically abusive to a 20-year-old woman who was a high school friend of his daughter. The woman told police that she became aware of Hang's disappearance in St. Paul and asked Mark about it. He said, "She entered my business and never came out," later telling her he would do to her what he had done to the girl in St. Paul. Police later found the woman in Mark's room, frozen in fear. She had been staying with Mark in exchange for housework because she had no permanent home. In 2017, 24 years after her disappearance, Hang's family finally held a spirit release ceremony in accordance with Hmong customs. The ceremony is meant to allow the person's soul to be free for reincarnation. Kua was against the spirit release ceremony, but eventually relented in hopes that releasing her spirit will raise awareness and maybe will make some people really talk. Hang's father, Xiong Li, had not wanted to have a spirit release ceremony for her until her body was found, but he encouraged Kua to proceed with it before he died in 2013. Hang's mother, Chong Veng, has forgiven whoever hurt her daughter, but she wants to know where Hang's remains are so they can give her a proper funeral and burial. Chong invited the community to Hang's spirit release ceremony, saying those who love her, please come. Also, please come and see that this is not something that's just in a story. It is real, too. Sergeant Paul Paulos of the St. Paul Police Department stated, "Hang isn't forgotten, and the case is active. It's ongoing. We will find her someday." Hang's case remains categorized as a missing person case and not a homicide. It is one of St. Paul's oldest missing person cases. Rest in peace, Ani Hang. You will get justice soon.